Welcome back, everybody. We are going to be doing a quick review on Throne of Liberty based off of my early experiences. I don't really have a lot invested in terms of how I feel about this game and the longevity of the game, so I'm kind of giving you guys my honest review as things go on, as I go through the game and as we learn more about it. I have a lot of experience with MMOs. I've played MMOs from the early days of World of Warcraft's beta release all the way through a game called Grow Online. I played Ion, I played Terra, I played Wildstar, I've played Champions Online, I've played City of Villains, I've played Black Desert Online extensively. So I come from a breadth of knowledge in how MMOs work. So if you want an unbiased review, somebody who does not really care about the longevity in terms of how this game goes, somebody who can give you a fair and honest review, you've come to the right place. All right, so I'm going to kind of break this down into a few sections. First, we're going to talk about the visuals, and then we'll talk about combat, and then the PvP systems of the game, and the group content. Now, keep in mind, I'm about level 29 in the game right now, so you're going to be getting the perspective of a player who's about midway through the leveling process. I will come back and do another review towards the end game of the process, so you guys can get a more updated version of this. Might be a week or two out, who knows. I want to get my hands on the game and really kind of experience it more before I give you guys a more in-depth analysis. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. So early on, you have we talk about the visuals here. You can see as I look around in the game is very striking. I was actually really impressed with the way this game came out. I did not expect it to have this beautiful of a visual, and right now the game is raining. So I just want to show you, even in foggy and rainy weather, how far and how vast your view of the game can be. You know, you can see the towns and the cities, and even the islands all the way out in the distance. Little lights that are kind of glimmering in the distance, mountains. I have my graphics turned all the way up, so this is the highest end visuals you can get. From my perspective, I feel like the game impressed me greatly. Hey, from the moment I jumped in, it felt really immersive, very alive. Even the graphics from up close and the animations, everything's very smooth. It looks a lot like a modern game you'd expect that was developed around the 2020 timeframe, which is very pleasing to see because I've seen so many MMOs that come out that don't really look that way. Korean games are pretty impressive with this. They usually come out with very beautiful looking games, and it's probably one of their hallmarks. I mean, you look at Black Desert Online, you look at Terra, these games are all very beautiful games. So graphics in the distance look absolutely incredible. Transformations are smooth and pleasant to look at, and we'll go over those transformations right now real quick. So I'll start with the flight transformation. We just jump off like this, and that's not flight. There we go. You can see this is transformation into a flight. It looks very smooth. It's pleasant. You have this almost right away from when you start the game, and then we get to the ground, right? And then we go into the ground transformation right here, and it looks even more beautiful. Like just the feeling of jumping in and out of transportation is really nice. And this is how the transportation works in this game. It is not, there's no like horses that you're going to mount on. There's no gliders you're going to have. You're just going to have these transformations. So it kind of feels a bit like a druid from World of Warcraft. You can just kind of transform to like flight form or ground form. There is a swimming form as well. So if you hit the water and you go for a little swim, there's that as well. And as you run around the world, there's lots of little things to find and explore, like this mysterious book that I just found right here. These are a part of a collectible, and the game kind of draws you towards them by having this nice purple glow at those things. You can see quest markers in the background, so helping you find those quests. There's no auto path system like you might be used to in Black Desert Online, but this is very reminiscent of games like Final Fantasy XIV and Guild Wars 2 and World of Warcraft in terms of how the actual questing and navigation work. Character and creature animations are very, very well done. You see right now I have my little Amatoy, I think it's called, Amatoy, whatever they call it, I don't know, some stupid fairy thing. There we go, it's called a Amatoy. Yeah, we'll go with Amatoy. I'm probably mispronouncing that. And if I am, you can correct me in the comments later. But you can see he's very, very cute. And you can select many different types of Amatoys. Each ones have different animations. The creatures in general in this game, even the mobs that you run around, here's another player running around right here beside me. You can see his character looks different than mine, even in ground transportation, because his animations are smooth and my animations are smooth. This is what I'm talking about. The game just looks beautiful. And as we go over and we start to fight mobs and we fight other creatures in the world, you'll also see that those animations are quite pretty. and we'll do a little quick combat just to show you guys how these animations look. So here's the combat mechanics. I play in what we call action camera. There's two different types. There's tab target, like traditional tab target, and there's the action cam. So right now what you're seeing here is the action camera, and I'll go a little more in depth into how actual combat works in a little while here. But yeah, this is generally the animations. They look beautiful. They play nicely. I was actually really pleasantly surprised with this. I was expecting a World of Warcraft simulator, and at first it didn't feel that great, but it did get better as I continue to play, and that's just because of as you can move along, you get cooldowns or what have you that help increase this game's playability. But we'll go over that in a minute. The early game textures looked a little bit janky to me, especially around the cloth. Like, they had these combat dresses, I guess is what you would call it. Combat skirts. I think combat skirts are cool. It's like what you'd see in like a traditional Final Fantasy game. They had that, and the cloth around the waist kind of looked a little janky, but as I progressed, this is all in-game armor, not something I purchased off the cash shop. So this is early leveling armor, and I found that your character model and the weapons themselves kind of look better as you kind of go along. So it is pleasing to see how these things have progressed and changed, and that they put some polish and they put some effort into it. Even at a distance, it doesn't look bad. And this is a maxed out distance camera. A lot of games, when you play like games like Final Fantasy 14 or World of Warcraft, you tend to play completely zoomed out, and it does make the game look like a bit of like an isometric game. So if you look at it like this, it kind of looks like a Diablo-esque type of game. But that's fairly normal for MMOs. If you play up closer, you get this nice little action cam feel, and that's just a design. That's just a choice you as a player make. I like to play like this because I feel like it makes the game feel more exciting and looks more exciting, especially with the action game mode, or rather the action cam. So the active action combat system. It's not a true action combat system, but it's good enough. It's somewhere in the middle. It's not bad. It's not awful. It's definitely more playable than something like Final Fantasy 14. Now, going into the character creator, right? The character creator in this game is a lot more in depth than something like World of Warcraft would be, or something like, say, Final Fantasy 14 or Guild Wars 2 was. Those are kind of very basic character creators, whereas this game gives you a lot more depth and control, and you might not see that right away, but you will see that as time goes on, and I'll kind of dig into that in just a moment here. Let me shrink myself down so you guys can see it better. All right, so we're going to talk about this character creator, right? So this, I would say the character creator's depth is somewhere between Black Desert Online and Terra. I feel like it has a little more character creation options than Terra and Ion did, and those were pretty in depth. But it does, and it's similar to those, but it has a nice modern facelift. But it's not as in depth as something like Black Desert Online, which gave you a ton of control over what your character looked like. So this is my character. You can see here you have a ton of different facial presets you can select from, and then you can also kind of drag the slider however you want it. And then you can select your skin, and you can pick whether you want beauty marks or freckles or what have you. You can select like a scar if you want a scar. You can select the opacity of that scar. So if you want like scarring across the face, it looks very realistic. It blends in nicely with your character. You can adjust the cheekbones, change these sliders a lot. There's a lot of flexibility. I mean, I'm gonna make basically a horror here as I slide these sliders around, so don't mind me. But there's a lot of flexibility here with these sliders, and this is all just in the face. You have bone structure, jaw, chin. There's a lot for you to be able to work on and do. And then you go over the eyes, and again, you have a lot of options. There is a RGB color selector. It can be kind of tough to pick the exact color you want, but you can nail it based off of your own. If you take the time to do it, you can nail it. Different iris types you can select. Lots of different options available to you. Your pupils, your eyes themselves, you can slide in if you want your aperture, if you want your like big wide eyes, or you want to look like this guy's saying something suspicious. You can change that aperture to kind of get that feeling that you want out of the game, in terms of how you want your character to look. And then you have your eyelids, of course, and this is nice. They give you nice options to raise your inner eyelid, in or out, your outer eyelid, up or down, and it kind of changes the way your character looks, your lower eyelids. So you can get a very Western look, you can get a very Eastern look. It really just depends on what look you're going for and you're aiming for. Your torso, your body, style. You can edit all this stuff as you please. I know a lot of you guys are going to be very tempted to go like maximum torso width, but it does look a little goofy because one thing the game does not let you do is go down to your underwear to see your character. So you're always going to view your character in his armor. So just keep that in mind as you are looking at this. You might end up with a really bulky character depending on how you customize it. I will say that a lot of armor in this game tends to look a little more on the slender side. So do keep that in mind, that if you go, too thin on your torso or you go too thin on your waist, you're gonna have a very dainty figure. If that's what you want, more power to you. If that's not what you want, keep that in mind, that if you don't want to look like a stick man with big biceps, not to go too dainty on the waist. All in all, I will say that this does look like a modern facelift to some of the, I want to say, early 2010s, mid 2010 MMOs. Not quite as in depth as Black Desert. You will notice some clipping. You pick a hairstyle, it will clip on your armor. That is just an unfortunate reality. Hopefully something they fix or work on later, who knows. But minor complaint. Now digging into the combat of this game. The combat of this game works very closely to Guild Wars 2. It's somewhere between Guild Wars 2 and World of Warcraft. Right? The tab targeting is very reminiscent of World of Warcraft. It's not. Guild Wars 2 has a sort of like a hybrid action combat tab target system where it gives you the option of using telegraph attacks. Not really the option. There are telegraph attacks. In this game, you have the option of an action camera or tab target. I chose the action camera because that's something I enjoy. But the game does feel good. The animations look smooth. They execute on time. There is no global cooldown. I can't tell you how much I love that. I love the fact that there's no GCD. It makes the game a lot more fun and exciting, and it just makes it feel like, it's about your cooldown management and not so much about a GCD management. That being said, you have two weapons you're going to pick. A lot of creators will advise you to pick two weapons and stick with those two. I chose Greatsword and Sword and Shield. So this is the PvE tank and the PvP kind of, I guess it's a PvP tank if you really think about it too. But this is the class that I chose because Greatsword is amazing. And I'm a Greatsword enjoyer. But this is something that's kind of cool about this game. Your stats, the bonus stats that you get, aren't determined based off of the weapon that's in your hand when you're doing the attacks. It's based off of the stance you're in. So it's easier to think about your combat, what weapon you're using in combat as a stance. So right now I'd be like in Sword and Shield or a Greatsword stance. In Greatsword stance, I can still use Sword and Shield abilities, and I'll use an example right here. That's a Sword and Shield ability, and I do that in Greatsword stance. There is no cooldown, there is no weapon swapping, it doesn't put my weapons on cooldown, I can swap freely. Here's another Sword and Shield ability in my Greatsword. You can see that happening in real time. Now, if I switch over to my Sword and Shield, I'm going to keep using those Greatsword skills because I love my Greatsword, right? And there is no penalty for using Greatsword skills while in Sword and Shield. In fact, they're instant. And if this is coming from BDO and you're used to maybe getting caught in a slow swap, never going to be a factor because the game doesn't punish you for swapping weapons around. So just something to keep in mind, that the stance, it's more of a stance than it is a proper weapon swap. And the stance, the way this affects you is, let me just clear this enemy off me real quick. The way that the stances affect you in this game is that your stat bonuses or your passives are derived from your stance. So if you're in a short Sword and Shield stance, let's go to our skills, right? If you're in that Sword and Shield stance, you're getting the passives from the Sword and Shield. So these are your passives, right? These are Sword and Shield passives: Skillful Evasion, Resilient Mind. And you can pause and take a closer look at these if you'd like. But you get passives based off of these when you're in Sword and Shield, and you get passives based off of your Greatsword skills when you're using the Greatsword. These are going to increase your damage and your maximum health and your CC resistance, things like that. So when you're in combat, like you're fighting a player 1 versus 1, maybe you want to be in your Greatsword stance. But when you get into a situation where perhaps you're fighting more than one player and you need to be more defensive while still being able to deal damage, you might switch over to your Sword and Shield stance while still belting out your Greatsword skills. Something to consider. All in all, I really enjoy the combat system. It's not Black Desert Online. Black Desert Online, in my opinion, has the bar none top-end combat system. There's no game that out there that I have seen that can beat that just yet. Their ability to animation cancel and their combo skills are fantastic. But if you liked Guild Wars 2, this is going to feel really, really comfortable. And if you liked World of Warcraft, it's going to feel familiar enough where you're not going to feel out of place doing it. If you liked games like Final Fantasy XIV, this game is going to be markedly faster in terms of the abilities you need to execute, whereas every ability is off of the global cooldown, whereas some abilities in Final Fantasy XIV are off the global cooldown, and it's a long global cooldown, and you're kind of interweaving those non-GCD abilities in. In this game, all your abilities are non-GCD abilities because there is no GCD. So there's something to keep in mind. When you first start the game, the combat does feel a little bit slow. And the reason that the combat feels a little bit slow is because your abilities execute kind of slowly. But one thing I did want to kind of point out to you is you upgrade these abilities as you go. So you're going to start with some abilities and they'll start at green, and then you'll upgrade them from green to blue. And this is where this is part of the grind of the game. And that's okay. I mean, I don't mind a grind. It keeps me busy. But these skills have upgrades and specializations. So sometimes the upgrade increases the damage. Sometimes it increases an effect on that ability. As you can see right here, these are all like damage increases on this ability. This is a stun duration, shock duration, cooldown increase. Cooldown increases are good or cooldown decreases, I should say, are good because they let you execute that ability faster. And when you're executing the ability faster, and you're doing that repeatedly without a GCD, it makes the game's combat feel faster. Now, couple that with skill specializations, where you can go in here and add custom effects to skills. Right, you have things that might increase the damage, that will have other effects, but also they decrease that cooldown again. So in this case, you have like a 15% cooldown decrease. Over here, you have a 15% cooldown decrease. On this one, you have a flat 5-second cooldown decrease, and those are factors. So those things do help combat feel a lot faster. In addition, like in the Ice Tornado, you have something that will increase your combat speed by 100, or your attack speed by 100% while using that skill. So as you enhance these abilities, as you upgrade them, the combat does start to feel a lot more fluid. So it takes time for you to get to the point where you're comfortable with the combat. So just keep that in mind as well. Another thing to keep in mind is that you will get transcendent skills and other things to help interweave with your abilities to make them more fluid. Moving on to the questing experience, I really enjoyed the way they tell the story in this game. I think this was brilliant. Again, this is one of those things that I didn't really want to like. Honestly, I wanted it to be bad, but it's actually not bad. The questing experience is good. When you complete a quest, what ends up happening is you'll go through on a main story quest, you might experience a cutscene. There's a lot of voice acting. The voice acting is actually pretty damn good quality. It is a pleasure to listen to. Lots of emotion baked into that voice acting, which is, if you're coming from a game like early Black Desert Online or Realm Reborn in Final Fantasy, those are really, really dry deliveries. This does feel more polished and more interesting to listen to. You don't have a character that's going to drone on and be overly verbose like in Final Fantasy XIV. I swear to God, there are some quests in that game. When I complete that quest, my brain straight up goes numb because the NPC just wants to talk, and they're saying a lot of nothing. They're just using words to exhaust me. It feels like they're trying to fill in time rather than be meaningful with the content. And in Guild Wars 2, I felt like the cutscenes were a little more direct and impactful, where you had a cutscene, and that cutscene had a direct impact to the story. It was quick, it was to the point, and then you moved on. One thing that this game does well is it's very much like that. Unlike in Black Desert Online, where your head is going to start spinning because it's making you talk to two NPCs back and forth, and your camera shifting back and forth, kind of getting you dizzy. In this game, it really doesn't do that. You have a nice cutscene from a good camera angle, and it's going to tell you a narrative, and then once that narrative is complete, it ends that cutscene. The nice thing about it is when it ends that cutscene, it will oftentimes you'll hear a narrator narrate what happens afterward. The narrator will kind of give you a summary. So if you are a dirty R spammer and you're just R spamming through quests, you're going to hear that narrator give you a quick summary of what you just went through. Traversing around the world is relatively easy. I can just kind of look at a point, like if I want to go back to town, it's very simple for me. I can just press a button. So if I want to go back to town, the town is accessible at the press of a button for me. I could just kind of press my teleport back to town button. I immediately start casting, and then away I go back to town. It puts you in a little warp screen, looks nice, and then you just come back to town. I mean, depending obviously on your load speed. As you can see, the game, even in early access, is extraordinarily populated. This is not even a starting town. This is kind of like the second or third town in. But as you progress, people are also going to be progressing with you, and especially early in the game feels most alive. I know that you don't see a lot of nameplates here, but these are all actual players. I've set my game up in a way that it's got a much more adventurous feel to it, where nameplates aren't displayed over every player's head, but rather only over the players that I mouse over. So while this might be an NPC, this here is an actual player, to give you an idea. And that's based off of how I've set up my UI. Overall questing experience, I'd give it a pretty good positive look. It's not the best I've ever experienced, but it's got it's taken good ideas from other games and applied them here. So just something to keep in mind as you continue to and quest on. Group content at level 29, I've gotten experience 1 dungeon so far. It was pretty straightforward. The mechanics were simple enough to understand, and you're gonna expect more of the simple stuff at these early levels. I should unlock the next dungeon here within the next level, but the dungeons do seem straightforward. It does deviate from the 5-man meta we usually see in video games. So usually in games like World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2, you have 5-man dungeons. In Final Fantasy XIV, you have a 4-man dungeon system. In this game, you actually have a 6-man dungeon system, which is very different than what I'm used to experiencing. So, enemy actions are, you basically read their animations, and then you predict whether you need to block or not, or you need to dodge, you need to get out, or you need to stand over here or do whatever. There's the usual trope of MMO mechanics, but all in all, the game does perform well in terms of the group content. Any game that has PvP content in it, one of the things you kind of worry about is toxicity in that PvP content. But with this game, one of the nice things about that is that it does kind of put you in a situation where you need to be in a group with people. So it does encourage people to play nice with each other, to play fairly, to be kind in the community to some degree. You're going to have your rivalries, you're going to have your beef, you're going to have your combat with people and issues and what have you. But it does make it so that, there is group content there, and that group content has a purpose and that brings people together. So I'm just kind of zipping around the world to kind of show you the different biomes. Apparently it's raining everywhere, which is weird, but whatever. Now, as for the PvP systems, right now at level 29, my PvP experiences have been pretty limited, right? But I can tell you based off of what my guildmates have been doing and what I've seen myself, just from looking at the UI, looking at the calendar, and seeing what's available to you in game, right? So open world bosses are a thing. You can see bosses on a schedule. The schedule looks like this, right? And then you can see these bosses right here above my head to the right. You can see these bosses on a schedule, and it will tell you which bosses are going to be PvP bosses. If it says peace, it's peaceful. If it says conflict, then when you go to that world boss, you're going to be fighting over that world boss. That becomes a PvP zone and is open world PvP, so something to keep in mind. There is another type of event, as you can see right here. It's called Dominion. The Dominion event is a world PvP also event. The game puts you on one of 3 teams. The teams are irrespective of your guild or your friendships. It just shoves you on one of 3 teams. And then boom, you are engaged in a world PvP content over an event. At night, you'll see some open world dungeons turn into PvP zones. So the game does have open world dungeons, and those do become combat areas at night, making it so you kind of have to watch your back. You have to pay attention to what time of day it is. There are also guild PvP events, but I don't really know much about them yet. And additionally, there is guild versus guild declarations. And from what I understand, you can declare on dozens of guilds in this game, unlike Black Desert Online, which had a system where you could only declare on 6 guilds at a time. On this game, if you really want to declare war against the whole world, you technically could. But yeah, for that group content, you're going to get those interesting mechanics that you have to get a read on enemy animations like you would expect from any Souls type game. So that is something that I do enjoy. In your class, you'll have to be able to perform in both a PvE and PvP function. So when you go to select what class you want to play, don't think about it strictly in terms of how you're going to perform in PvP, but think about how that class is going to also be in PvE. If you want to be a DPS, if you want to be a damage dealer, you need to pick a DPS class, or combine two, not really picking a class, but you're combining 2 weapon sets that create a DPS class. If you are going to want to tank, like this class here, sword and shield / greatsword as a tank, then that's going to be the role that you're going to be performing in those dungeons. So it is something that you need to keep in mind as well when you're making that selection. So that's about it. This is, like I said, it's a really short video. Just kind of wanted to talk about some of the basics of the game. My experience at level 29. I know a lot of people have been asking about how I feel about it. I do feel positively about it right now, but it is so hard to make a decision on an MMO because MMOs typically do not reveal their true end game until about, 2 to 3 months in. About a month in, people will have been level 50 for a little while and they'll be on that grind for a hot minute. And by the time that they hit that 2-month part, they've been on that grind for a while. Now the game is free to play, so there really is no reason for you not to try this for yourself on October 1st when it comes out. If it looks even remotely interesting to you, or if you're just curious, you want to scratch that itch, you can. But the fact is, we don't know if this game has any kind of longevity in the North American market because we don't know what the North American market's going to feel about the end game grind. I have no idea what it looks like. There have been some creators that have done their research and looked into it, but you are always going to be filtered through somebody else's bias. So you need to try and experience that for yourself to see if it's something that's tolerable for you or not. Right now, I have no information on it, but as I get closer to that endgame content and I start getting on that grind, I'll do an update video talking about how I feel about it, and we'll go from there. All right, guys. As always, thank you guys for being here. Thank you all for tuning in. You guys are amazing. You guys are the reason I'm able to do what I do. If you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to the channel. It does help me out quite a bit. I am trying to make more YouTube content for you guys. This does take a tremendous amount of effort for me. It's not like I have an editor for the long form content. I'm just doing this out of the goodness of my heart, so to speak. And I don't really get anything out of doing YouTube other than just stuff for you guys to enjoy. So that's it. As long as you guys enjoy it, send it to a friend. Let them enjoy it as well. All right. That said, guys, God bless, and I will see you guys on my next live stream.